It's almost not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I did with my children.
What is worse than a mother who takes her own child's life?
That poor kid. I really need to stop this. Why can't I?
I'm Oprah Winfrey, and like millions of other Americans, I'm a survivor of child abuse. I was only 9 years old when I was raped by my 19-year-old cousin. He was the first of 3 family members to sexually molest me. I kept the abuse a secret over 20 years. Every year in America, nearly 3 million cases of child abuse are reported. Who knows how many go unreported? We're here tonight to fight this national epidemic of child abuse and neglect. You're about to meet 6 perpetrators of sexual, physical, and psychological child abuse. And while their stories may shock you, they are frighteningly typical of the 7,300 cases of abuse and neglect reported every day. We hope the stories of these abusers and their victims can help all the children and adults among us who, for too long now, have been scared silent. Contrary to popular belief, most child molesters are not strangers. Practically all child sexual abuse is inflicted by a close family member or friend. A warning, you're about to hear some graphic descriptions of sexual abuse. But to stop and to prevent this crime against children, we need to face the hidden truth.
And in the beginning, probably up until I was 11, there was just really just heavy, petting, touching, and probably like oral sex. But then when I was 11 or 12, it started to become intercourse, and really frequently, maybe once or twice a week.
There were times in my mind when I couldn't wait for her to mature more, to be ready for intercourse. But at the same time, I refrained, thinking at the same time that was, it just can't go that far. I can stop it before then. And I couldn't.
Dell is 48 and a successful engineer. He sexually molested his daughter Eva from age 7 to 21, and his younger daughter Bonnie from age 9 to 14. Like so many families in which incest occurs, they appeared normal from the outside.
My dad was an usher at church. Mom was part of the PTA. It was really important to look good to everyone else because it looked so bad from the inside.
I really don't know when a sexual attraction started. I know that teaching her to swim as a young girl, touching and feeling in a way that she didn't know what was going on yet. Once I realized that Eva would allow me to do certain things, then I could push her to do more, because her whole goal in life was to make Dad happy. I don't ever recall thinking of her as a child. In my mind, she was more an adult.
I was isolated from my brother and sister. I felt really alone. So when somebody gave me attention, that is my dad, it was sort of attention that I needed and was missing, but also he had planned it that way. He planned for me to be needing that and missing that. He usually started out asking if we could go out for a date, ice cream, a movie, or something, and I always knew what that meant. If it was or something, I was in trouble. Then he usually would want me to be in a skirt, a change clothes, into something that was easily accessible to him, which made me really feel sick because I felt like a slut. I felt like I was, making myself open for something that I didn't enjoy.
Part of the grooming is to indicate that, you can't tell anybody about this because they'll come in and break up the family. And to a child, that's their world. So you don't need force to put them into a fear mode that's greater than you can imagine.
Incest is the whole family's problem. Like many mothers of sexual abuse victims, Dell's wife, Jan, was herself molested as a child. Since she couldn't bear to face the pain of her own abuse, she shut out the signs of her daughter's suffering.
I felt somewhere in the pit of my stomach that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. I ignored all the clues and the symptoms and the feelings and thought there was something wrong with me, that I would even think something like that.
The signs that she was not getting was the fact that I was a very sad kid. If this was such a great family, why was I so sad? Why couldn't I look people in the eye? And why did I walk funny? By the time I reached an age where I knew it was wrong, it was so inbred in me. Part of me was kept a child. I wasn't 21 somewhere inside. I was still 7 or 8.
It wasn't until Eva was a young adult and had spent time away from her family that she was finally able to break 13 years of silence.
I took my sister out for coffee. I go, okay, do you know what it means to be molested? And she went, Eva, I know. I'm being molested too. At that point, I was furious. It wasn't for myself that I could stop it. It was for somebody else. We decided to wait till the next morning to say anything to my mom.
And I said, we can't stay in the same house for another hour. We just can't. I opened the safe. We own a gun. I took the bullets, the clip from the gun, because I didn't know what Dell would do. When he found out that we were gone, I thought he might try to kill himself.
And I just remember her saying to my dad, we know what you've done. Damn you. And I can't believe that she ever, would come to our rescue like that.
It was like 500 pounds of cement was lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I was going to collapse, but I sat down and I said, thank God it's over. Now what do we do?
Dell pleaded guilty to sexual abuse charges and served 1 year in jail. During 3 years of separation from his family, he has undergone intensive therapy to help him recover from his abusive behavior and to uncover its roots. Dell's history revealed severe emotional cruelty at the hands of his stepfather, and like 70% of all men who molest children, Dell himself had been sexually abused by a neighbor when he was 6.
I came from a very strict religious family that didn't even say words like sex. There was just no way I could communicate that this 20-year-old boy next door did something to me out in the barnyard. So in order to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again, I had to be in control of my life and everybody around me forever. For years, Eva pretty well lived under my command. One of the things that I feel very strongly about as part of the recovery process for me is to gain trust again with my daughter somehow.
Do I think my dad's really in recovery? I reserve that. I don't know.
Changes were calling, but did I have to say goodbye? I don't know. It seemed right to me.
After 3 years of no contact with her father, Eva made the courageous decision to confront him for the first time about the scars he's left on her life.
I'd like him to know how much he's hurt me, how much he's hurt every other person in this world that I love. The damage that was done was to my self-respect, to my ability to have other people around me that love me. I don't let them. I always want to know what they want in return.
This meeting was really kind of like a last chance. What if all she sees is the same old dad? Well, I've said I'm sorry several times, but that's really, I wish I could say it in a way that she'd believe it and know it.
What do you want to be? Do you know what you want from me? And if we ever meet again, can we still be friends?
Seems like it's been a lot longer than 3 years. I have a ton of apologies. I mean, I don't know what you want to hear.
I don't think that I want apologies. I think I just want some understanding. Maybe some rationality.
There's nothing rational about what I did. You were the first person in my life that I knew loved me. Before that, in my own mind, I was really unlovable.
No, I feel that way.
I'm sure.
But that doesn't mean I'm gonna go out and molest my kids.
No, most likely, unless you get a lot of counseling, you'll go out and end up marrying a molester.
I know we have a lot of work to do. We're not gonna finish it today. And it's not gonna be suddenly, you know, going and having picnics together all the time. It's not gonna be like that.
I don't want to, draw a picture of what family life ought to be and expect everybody to jump into it. I just don't want to be out of the picture.
You're really lucky that you're still part of the picture.
I knew this wasn't going to work out easy.
I see you being very vulnerable, and my first reaction would be to want to take care of you and make sure you didn't hurt. And that's exactly what I've done all my life, and I don't want to do that.
Well, we've all done our roles and taken care of each other in the areas that we learn how to do.
Well, I don't like the one I learned.
It's difficult to understand how you can love someone so much and do so much damage to them. My daughters had something taken away from them, and it was me that took it away.
I would say to anybody else who's like my dad, who wants to do the things my dad did, I know you have problems. Don't take it out on your kids, because it's not their fault. You know, don't create this hell that you live in for them, too.
If you or someone you know is involved in a child abuse situation, please call this toll-free number for assistance. 1-800-4-A-CHILD.
We're a 2TV family, but on Saturdays, we all...
Tasha is 15 and in her short life has sexually abused at least 5 other children, ranging in age from 7 to 12 years old. She's in group therapy with other juvenile sex offenders at the Waypoint program, a lockup facility for children who have become molesters. The average age for their first offense, 11 years old.
I've never met an adolescent sex offender who came from a normal background. Tasha is typical in the Waypoint program. Her past history is a very chaotic family life. She was sexually abused by a member of her family for many years. Some of that involved force and violence, and some pretty severe history of abuse.
I'm going to talk about my last victim. He's a boy. He's in my family. It took me two to 3 weeks to set up what I was going to do to him. He was around about 7 years old. I rub my body up against him when other people was not around. I do it when he's sitting down somewhere or standing up. I sexually fondled him. I had full intercourse. I always picked victims that were younger than me because I know that I can take power control over them. That power was like, it felt real good. I was getting a kick out of it. I did not feel remorse whatsoever. I didn't care if they would have had nightmares about it. If that happened to me, it's gonna happen to you too. I picked a fight with him outside one day and kind of throw him around a little bit, but I didn't mean to hurt him that bad. I punched one of his teeth out. I broke his arm.
What made you want to do all that to him?
Because he was a guy. It was a boy.
This is her only male victim that we know of.
Yeah.
We want to find out what that's all about.
Yeah, when you committed this offense when you was 12 years old, was it before or after your brother had started molesting you?
It was after.
What's the worst thing your brother did to you when he abused you, Tasha, that brings up all this anger towards guys and towards this victim?
He followed me with objects. Pencils, deodorant bottles, circle bottles, brooms.
How you feel after he did all that to you? I mean, like, didn't you have a lot of problems?
I had a lot of problems. I couldn't barely use the bathroom. I had blood in my pants all the time. I would walk funny. My mom would ask me what was wrong. I mean, I lied to my mom for what my brother did to me. I covered his ass, knowing that what he did to me was wrong.
Let it out. Let it out, Tasha.
After he did that to me, I took a shower. I mean, I stayed in the bathroom for wholly 3 hours taking a shower because of him. Touching me on my body that I didn't want it to be touched. I had to drink a whole bottle of mouthwash. I had to wipe the blood up off the floor. This shit pisses me off. I'm getting sick and tired of my whole life. All my life I was getting offended. I got offended by my uncle. I got offended by my brother.
I think a lot of people have difficulty understanding why a victim might become an offender. And they ask themselves, well, if it was done to them, why don't they understand how it felt when they're doing it to somebody else? But remember, the offender is not conscious of what their victim is feeling. The victim is simply an object. The offender is not in touch with what it felt like to them at the time. That's something we take them back to in treatment in order to teach them remorse. Tasha, I'm going to point something out to you that I think you're ready to hear. Do you see the way you feel about your brother and all the feelings you're expressing now? Do you see that your victims may feel the same way about what you did to them?
Yep. Yep.
Talk to us about that.
My victims will probably hate me, especially the 7-year-old. I did this to my cousins, man, and my family. I screwed their lives up. Y'all always walking around here saying putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Before you put yourself in anyone's shoes, you should put yourself in your victim's shoes. That's what I'm doing, man. I can't believe I did this shit. I was at 11 years old and I couldn't stand nobody touching me.
Tasha's prognosis is very good. The key for Tasha is going to be able to continue this type of work when she needs to leave this facility. She's come a long way. Now, that's not to say that she's cured, because she'll never be cured. But that's to say that she's learned some skills that we hope will benefit her when she leaves this program.
If I wouldn't come here, I would have been still molested. And I know that for a fact. I am so happy that I'm here.
I don't want to do it anymore. Because I know I done messed up somebody else's life, a whole life. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Hurricane Andrew's devastating winds and rains have left thousands of families hungry, homeless, and in shock.
She threw me out. It's pretty terrible out here. I wish I could go back home if they take me. I just don't know what else to do.
Wherever you are, Covenant House can get you help. Call us on the 9 line. It's free. 1-800-999-9999.
Covenant House.
How could it happen?
It's their fault. They did it.
We should have known. Who do you turn to?
You have 4 witnesses, and that's not enough?
Larimer raped my daughter.
When do the nightmares stop?
And how could Teddy keep something like this inside him?
Pam Dauber. John.
Every day throughout America, parents accidentally and intentionally cross the line that separates discipline from abuse. The ultimate consequence of this violence is that every day, 4 children die from abuse or neglect.
Once upon a time, my father told me that when us children came, he knew that there were 2 ways to raise children. One was through love, and the other was through fear, and he didn't know how to love. So he raised us through fear.
You can't always recognize fear in a photograph album.
This is Grandma.
When Jill, now 52, and her brother Dave look back on their childhood, they remember what lay behind the smiles in the family portraits.
I think to the outside world, our family appeared pretty normal. In reality, living inside my family was like living in a concentration camp.
Dad was like the secret police. You never knew when he was going to come in.
We very seldom got spankings. It was beatings.
I walked out of the bathroom right into my dad's fist because I had woke him up by flushing the toilet, and he beat me.
And Dad had come home in a bad mood, and I picked the pork chop off the serving platter that he had wanted for himself, and because of that, he beat me, and then he choked me to unconsciousness. No one could do anything. The police wouldn't, the social agencies wouldn't. Dad owned us kids. This is how far I can trace back the abuse.
Jill has been able to trace the abuse in her family back 130 years to the time of the Civil War.
From what I can find out from Dad and from the rest of the family, he was as abused as we were. He was beaten by his mother. His father was an alcoholic. So we can go back with this 5 generations. And of course, our own kids have picked it up. Your daughter gave her child up for adoption because she was afraid of battering him. And so in Jill's family, it just kept happening generation after generation after generation because there was no way to interrupt it and nobody stopped it. And it kept being acceptable and forgotten about and not talked about. A part of me still loves him, but the larger part is just so angry, just so angry. And one of the biggest feelings that gets stopped in physical abuse, well, any abuse, but physical abuse, is the feeling of rage and anger about what's happening and the humiliation and shame about being treated in such a disrespectful, horrible manner. So life is not fair, but to have to spend my first 20 years, my first 30 years, to being told how awful I am. How am I supposed to build a life after that?
Jill's first marriage ended in divorce and severe depression. 4 years later, she met her second husband. They had 2 sons, Roger and Carl, and lived in an affluent suburban neighborhood.
This is where I lived for 15 years. We had a very nice life on the outside, but I was still very much dealing with the rage. I didn't know how to be a mother. I didn't know the difference between discipline and abuse. My son had developed colic. And one day, I was just exhausted, and I wanted to take a nap. And my son was crying again, as usual. And so I
put him in his carriage in the basement and stuffed a cloth in his mouth to keep him quiet. I could have killed him. I could have smothered him.
25 years later, Jill returned to the house where in 1967, her unresolved rage finally caught up with her.
That rage is right below the surface, and that rage can funnel up or blow up at any time.
Then one weekend, I just snapped. I had spent the whole day cleaning house, and it looked spotless. And the kids got up early, and they'd gotten in the kitchen and gotten potato chips out and had just scattered potato chips all over the floor, my nice clean floor that I worked so hard to get. It was just like it was the last straw. And I got mad. And I told Roger to go to bed, and he did. And I picked Carl up and I carried him into his room. And I just wanted them to get in bed and stay there so I could clean up the living room. And I came back and I picked up the curtain rod and I went over to Roger and whacked him a couple of times on the back end. Whacked Carl a couple of times and walked back to the door, and when I threw the curtain rod, and I don't remember seeing it fly. I don't remember seeing it land. There's about a full minute there that I don't remember, and I choose not to remember. I don't think I could live through that again. But I saw the blood gushing out of his eye.
In that moment, the curtain rod hit 3-year-old Roger with enough force to pierce his eye and pass into his brain.
I had never abused the children to the point where they had to be hospitalized. I didn't even think of myself as an abuser at that time. It just didn't occur to me. I went into his room, and he had tubes and wires everywhere, and I felt so helpless. Just helpless. There was nothing I could do. Although the hospital's changed a lot, I could remember the waiting. And I could see Roger in that bed. And the waiting, and the guilt, and the wondering what's going to happen. The first thing my dad said to me when we walked in the hospital was, the sins of the fathers are visited on the daughters. Everything I'd feared from my father killing me, and now I've killed my son. Roger died at 2:30 in the morning. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, the phone started ringing because there had been a story about his death. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the police came and arrested me.
Jill was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and faced a sentence of 1 to 20 years in the state penitentiary. Her conviction was overturned on appeal. In the words of the court, there was no evidence of unnatural beating, either on the morning of the injury or any other time, and that Jill was a normal mother interested in the welfare of her family.
Things have changed a lot in the last 25 years. The rules have changed. The way society views child abuse has changed. No, I don't think I would be acquitted today. If there had been the kind of resources 25 years ago that there are now, you better believe I would have used them. But no matter what the courts say, I'm responsible for my son's death. I killed my son. Accident or design, I killed my son. And there's no way I can get away from that. I will have to live with that the rest of my life.
If you or someone you know is involved in a child abuse situation, please call this toll-free number for assistance, 1-800-4-A-CHILD.
You got to be. Join Ariel.
There's another form of abuse that's more difficult to recognize and to prosecute. Psychological or emotional abuse consists of the cruel, thoughtless words and rejecting actions that make children and teenagers feel worthless, unlovable, and stupid. Those feelings can become self-fulfilling prophecies that children carry with them into adulthood.
What is the matter with you? Why are you crying?
Always getting.
Why can't you be more like your sister?
It's all your fault.
He had a way of laughing at me that was very humiliating, especially in front of people.
Don't be such a baby.
It was dangerous to try and be open at home because that would give Dad an opening to say something nasty or put me down.
I was told that I was ugly and stupid and incompetent and irresponsible and lazy, and that I would never amount to anything.
I think emotional abuse is even more frightening because you don't have anything to pin it on, nothing to go, this is the abuse.
Can't you do anything right?
Wish you were never born.
Certainly children know when they're experiencing it. Being put down, being humiliated, being constantly criticized. And I don't mean a routine parental criticism, but I mean the type of criticism that never lets up, a type of criticism that never has anything positive to say.
Without exception, every one of the perpetrators on this program was also psychologically abused as a child.
There's no measurement of emotional abuse. Very, very seldom can you call and have an agency whose job it is to prevent the abuse of children respond to a report of emotional abuse.
From the time a child is born, they're looking up to significant adults in their lives and they're saying, "Who am I? Who am I?" And with every interaction, with every word, we're telling them who they are.
George is a lecturer and consultant who travels the country teaching parents and professionals how they can help stop child abuse. And George speaks from experience. Years ago, he physically and verbally abused his 2 former wives and 5 children.
It hurts to think about what I did to my children. I called them all stupid. You know, I told them they were backwards. I've told them they were lazy. I've had occasions where I've told my children that they never were going to amount to much. And I know that has a major effect on who they are now. And I feel sad because they are having to go through some of the same struggles I went through, like difficulty in marriage, difficulty in employment, settling, achieving. And that could have been different.
To understand how he became an abusive parent, George had to look to his past and trace the cycle of abuse in his own family.
I can remember when I was like 11, 12 years old, and my mother was still being beat by her mother. You know, I can remember her hitting her and threatening her and throwing things at her. And as I think about abuse in my life, the physical and emotional abuse, it was something that was always there, not only in the home, but in the community.
Recently, George returned to the housing projects where he grew up to confront some painful memories.
So much feeling, so much feeling. Happy times and sad times. Sad times. I could hear my mother telling me that I wasn't any better than anybody else and don't think I'm so special. The negative messages about who you are and what you're going to do were pretty constant up until I left home. And regardless of what I do, I'll still have that pain. It'll always be there. It'll always be. It'll never go away. You know, I'll struggle with that for as long as I live. What I want to do is to go back to my mom in a loving way and say, this is what I experienced, and to have her understand where I'm coming from and have her to really see how the experiences of my childhood might have affected me.
We didn't consider it abuse at that time. Yeah. We were just doing what we thought was the right thing. Mm-hmm. And the right thing to us was smack you upside the head and tell you shut up. Yeah. Realize now that that wasn't the right thing.
When I work with parents, most of them who come in say, I made the decision not to do to my children what was done to me. And then I ask them, I say, that's wonderful. What will you do instead? There's never an answer. They don't know.
Andy knows what to do.
We're not very aware of the power we have to influence children in positive ways. By knowing them and talking with them. Talking to children as though they're people, not as though they're things.
Good job, okay.
So I'm willing to go anywhere and talk to anyone at any time about eliminating child abuse, about how to say good things to your children, how to be nurturing. I don't believe that there are bad parents. I don't believe there are bad people. I believe there are people who don't have the knowledge they need to do what they need to do. You know, the most important job that we do in our lives is to raise children, to be parents, and yet no one ever teaches us how to do that.
For information about improving your parenting skills, please call the toll-free number at the end of our program. It's not easy to forgive any adult, especially a parent who violates a child. But even in the most severe cases of abuse, some shattered families can turn tragedy into healing.
My wife and I used to watch programs on child abuse. You know, the movies, and I was always, oh, they ought to do something to this son of a bitch, you know. He's a worthless scum of the earth. And here I was, molesting my own daughter. I sexually molested my daughter, Wendy, from the time she was 8 years old until the time she was about 10 years old. I would make her masturbate me to ejaculation. I would also belittle her, put her down, beat her, hit her, make physical demands on her, tell her she was a whore, a slut. I was in total control.
He told me, never tell anybody, it's a secret, nobody can know. And if I told anybody, he was gonna kill me.
Brian is a 38-year-old factory worker who sexually molested his daughter, Wendy, for 2 years. The abuse came to an end the day his wife, Roseanne, walked in on it.
He had his hands in her underwear, and he was holding her hand in his.
And there was denial instantly, you know. Oh, it only happened once. Hey, I didn't do it that often, you know, like, does that make any difference? No.
Brian served a short jail term and remained separated from his family after release, but they still faced difficult decisions. After such a betrayal, could they ever be a family again?
I was worried because I felt that I wasn't ever going to see my dad again, because my dad said I would never see him again if I told.
Children will tolerate just about anything to keep their families. That is, to me, what I see in the children's eyes is, please, if I'm going to tell, don't let my family fall apart. Of course, that's not always possible, but with treatment, I think it's possible for a family to choose to stay together if they wish to.
Though Roseanne doubted they could ever reunite, they began a 6-day-a-week process of individualized and group therapy, specifically for families torn apart by incest. In therapy, both parents came to grips with the lasting effects of the sexual abuse in their own childhoods.
I never thought that I would marry somebody that could molest children. And I never thought, during the first few years of our marriage, I never thought that Brian was even capable of it. But I didn't know his background either.
As a 5-year-old boy, Brian was raped by an older relative and then forced to participate in child pornography for 3 years. During 2.5 years of counseling, Brian learned not only why he abused his daughter, but also how to prevent it from happening again.
I have a pattern that led up to my abuse, and these are my warning signals.
Knowing that pattern is crucial. It can tell you if the molest will repeat again. For instance, an abundance of pornography, substance abuse, the evidence of a need to control, to judge, poor self-esteem. We call them red flags. The man who starts working in treatment begins to lose these traits. It takes a deep commitment to change and a deep commitment to grow for these men to have treatment be effective. This family has been very committed to treatment from the very beginning.
I had planned on getting a divorce. I had seen a lawyer. I had done everything. And after a year, I started seeing a lot of major changes in him.
A year and a half ago, the family reunited, but all of them remain in therapy and under close professional observation.
I wouldn't have stopped on my own. At one point, I can remember after I had abused my daughter that I said to myself, that poor kid, I really need to stop this. Why can't I?
I'd like to say to my dad that he shouldn't have done it to me. He shouldn't have done it at all.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was all my fault, and it never, ever should have happened to you. Never.
Most parents don't intend to hurt their children, but they may lack the maturity or the parenting skills to raise kids without abuse. But now there are effective new ways to intervene and save these families before it's too late.
It's a scary feeling because you don't know what you're going to do or what you're capable of doing when you lose control, and that's what really scares you.
2 years ago, Beatrice, a 22-year-old mother of 3, rushed to a hospital emergency room after lashing out in anger at her 2-year-old daughter, Roxanne.
I was so mad and angry, full of hate. I got Roxanne, and I ended up breaking her leg. I was so afraid of them taking her away. I lied. I told them that she fell because I didn't want them to take her away, but they still did.
Child Protective Services immediately placed Roxanne in foster care.
It's hard. It's hard when your babies are being taken away.
The court ruled that Beatrice must seek rehabilitation if she hoped to regain custody of her daughter. She was enrolled in Avance, a multi-service support program that works to strengthen families through education.
Every time I don't get what I want, then I hit the child. And when he doesn't get what he wants to hit me. But soon enough, he learns that I hit harder than he hit. So he hits others. And then I hit him because he hit somebody else. And so it's a pattern that repeats itself over and over.
And you don't even realize it.
Y no te das cuenta. We don't realize it.
Her case was referred to psychotherapist Maricela Grun.
We found that she had a lot of risk factors for more abuse with her children, she was very young, very immature. She was very isolated. She didn't have any kind of support.
Since Beatrice came from an abusive background, she never had a chance to see healthy parenting behaviors in action. Using Avance's highly effective program of home visitation, Maricela set out to show Beatrice there were better ways to raise children.
And every time he does that, you need to tell him, you don't hit. You don't get mad at him, don't hit him back, but don't say, oh.
They were too little to understand, and they didn't even know why they were getting hit, and I hit them.
She needed to be taught ways of discipline instead of hitting the children or screaming at them or yelling when they did something that she didn't like.
You having fun? Your mama stay with you? Well, they taught me how instead of spanking them, just to sit down and talk to them and let them know what it is that they're doing wrong instead of having to hit them all the time. Hold on, okay? Mommy couldn't cook Papa. And it took me a long time to become nice and have patience because I was real bad. I had a bad attitude when I first came here.
It was a long process. It was through the visits that we had. It was through the classes with the information that was provided in the classes and through group therapy and individual therapy with her. We had to show her that we believed that she could do it. We had to show her that she was somebody and that she was important.
I really made a change when I opened up and let everybody know what really happened. After that, I started trying harder to get her back, and I succeeded. It was like a dream. I said to myself, now I have everything there is in this world. I don't want anything else.
Beatriz is so much better now. She has a loving husband. I know now that she's still in the process of healing. And I know that if she ever comes to a crisis, she knows where to find help.
Ryson was old enough to remember what happened, and she's always going to remember what happened to her. And I feel bad because sometimes she gets scared, but I let her know it's not the same anymore. Everything's going to be different. You got to sit down and really say to yourself, well, I'm going to do this the right way, and I'm not going to hit my kids. I'm not going to hurt them. I'm going to try to get them to understand what's right and what's wrong. That's the difference.
Next on
Child abuse affects all of us, and it's going to take all of us to stop it. The people we profiled on this program paid a tragic price for what they know about child abuse. Each of them has a final thought to share.
I think people out there really should take a good hard look at themselves and their own family. I'm not going to say you're going to find something in your family that's inappropriate. I hope you don't. But if you do, I hope you find somebody that can help you.
I would tell other men that you need to learn to communicate with everyone in your family without secrets. Secrets build upon secrets, and you are as bad as your secrets.
I wish that there were people in my life who were informed on this stuff and who really knew the questions to ask. Like, point blank, look me straight in the eyes and ask me if I'm being molested or touched in any way that I feel uncomfortable with.
If you're offending right now, I suggest, if anything, you go get help. Because you can mess up somebody's life just as maybe somebody done mess up yours.
I wish I had known the reason that I lost my temper with my children was that my expectations were unrealistic, not that their behavior was unacceptable.
Once you open up and you let somebody know, it's going to make you feel better, and you're going to get help, and you're going to feel a lot more at ease with yourself and love yourself more and love your kids.
Tell anybody who will listen. Tell your parent. Tell your neighbors, your friends. Tell your guidance counselor at school. Tell your teachers until somebody listens to you.
Kids are afraid to tell, so they keep it silent. I wish there was a magic word or something that I could say to get kids to tell, to get parents to listen. Every adult in this country needs to listen.
If you are a victim, an abuser, an adult survivor of abuse, or if you want help with parenting, consult your local phone book or please call our toll-free hotline number, 1-800-4-A-CHILD. To receive a free pamphlet on how to prevent and stop child abuse, call the same number, 1-800-4-A-CHILD. We can no longer afford to be scared silent.
Before it starts, call Kids Peace, 1-800-858-KIDS